In 1982, the so-called Only Band That Matters, aka The Clash, finally achieved the kind of commercial success that had eluded them since they burst on the punk scene in 1977. But instead of propelling them to superstardom, this song would mark the beginning of the end for The Clash. It would be the last time that the classic lineup would record an album together. So this is the story of the prophetically titled Should I Stay or Should I Go, and how the very success for which they had yearned ultimately led to their demise. And if you love everything to do with rock history like I do, make sure to subscribe and join the pack.
Should I stay or should I go?
By the end of 1977, punk had become a major phenomenon in the UK, and in January, the New Musical Express declared 1977 as the year of The Clash. Now, with the popularity of punk, major labels soon wanted to cash in, and The Clash entertained several offers from pretty big labels before ultimately deciding on CBS for £100,000. Now, this was a huge amount of money for a band that had only been together for 6 months, had only played around 30 gigs, and had headlined just a few times. Naturally, there were howls of protest from within the punk community about selling out, but after their first single, White Riot, the protests immediately stopped. That song was written after lyricist, vocalist and guitarist Joe Strummer and bassist Paul Simonon were involved in the riots at the Notting Hill Carnival of 1976. It was a call to arms to white kids to share the outrage over the heavy-handed treatment of black teenagers by the local police. Other than the Sex Pistols, who basically advocated for blowing up the entire system, there hadn't been a band that spoke to the concerns of the left who felt unseen. But after the release of their first album, they had found that voice in The Clash. After their self-titled debut album in 1977, they followed with Give 'Em Enough Rope in 1978. That album saw them depart from a straight punk sound and incorporate more bluesy influences. They also became enamored with rock and roll, and you can hear this influence on 1979's double album, London Calling. This was the band's first platinum album, and the single, London Calling, began to get significant airplay on American AOR FM stations. That's album-oriented rock, by the way. And you don't need me to tell you that this album was regarded as their best and really stood the test of time. Not content with just a double album, in 1980 the band released Sandinista, a triple album that derived its name from the left-wing guerrilla fighters in Nicaragua. And this was the first album where writing credits went to the entire band, not just Mick Jones and Joe Strummer. It also put all of their musical inspirations on full display. Despite the positive accolades from the critics and sold-out concert tours, the band still hadn't much commercial success. They had still never had a top 10 hit in the UK, and just one song, Train in Vain, had reached the top 40 in the US, topping out at 23. But with their fifth album, 1982's Combat Rock, this would soon change. Propelled by heavy rotation on the newly launched MTV, Rock the Casbah helped the album reach new sales heights. However, for longtime fans of The Clash, this album was a bit of an odd one. It marked a shift toward a more mainstream, chart-focused sound. Although I suppose there is some argument to say that The Clash's willingness to break free from punk's boundaries is what actually makes them truly punk at their core. But that's a whole debate for another time. The album charted at number 2 and spent 23 weeks in the UK charts. Over in the States, it peaked at number 7 and spent 61 weeks on the chart. By all accounts, the 6-week recording process in New York was pretty contentious. There was tension and fighting between Jones and Strummer, and they were really struggling to deal with Topper Headon, whose heroin habit was becoming a massive problem. The one song they genuinely seemed to have fun with was the other single off the album, Should I Stay or Should I Go? Although credited to the entire band, Mick Jones was the principal songwriter. Now, when it comes to Clash songs, Strummer and Jones usually shared most of the writing duties, with Strummer usually penning the lyrics and Jones adding the music. Strummer handled most of the vocals but would occasionally share the lead with Jones. However, with this song, it would be Jones, not Strummer, who would sing the lead. Now, according to legend, the song is either about Jones's imminent departure from the band or his romance with Ellen Foley, the singer who duetted with Meatloaf on the Bat Out of Hell album. But according to Jones, neither of those theories are accurate. As he stated in 1991, It wasn't about anybody specific, and it wasn't preempting my leaving the Clash. It was just a good rockin' song, our attempt at writing a classic. When we were just playing, that was the kind of thing we used to like to play. Now, one of the most striking things about this song are how the lyrics are echoed in Spanish. Strummer came up with this idea, and he enlisted the help of his friend and country rocker Joe Eli to help him with the translation. Eli later said, "I'm singing all the Spanish verses on that, and I even helped translate them. I translated them into Tex-Mex, and Strummer kind of knew Castilian Spanish because he grew up in Spain in his early life. And a Puerto Rican engineer, Eddie Garcia, kind of added a little flavour to it. So it's taking the verse and then repeating it in Spanish. Now, when it came to the lead vocals for this song, Strummer thought that Jones would be a better fit, and Jones thought that Strummer would be a better fit. Eventually, Jones agreed to do the lead vocals. The song reached number 17 on the UK charts and number 43 in the US, not as high as Rock the Casbah, but still very respectable. For many though, this song signalled the end for the Clash. As mentioned, Mick Jones was focusing now on creating classics, or in other words, chart-friendly songs. But Strummer was much more driven by his political beliefs, and he was adamant that the Clash should be used to amplify the voices of the oppressed and raise awareness about injustice. And this growing divide between their priorities is evident in Should I Stay or Should I Go? The track was crafted with radio play in mind, and it succeeded, becoming one of the least political songs on combat rock. Instead of delivering a political message, it found its groove on indie rock dance floors. And just a year later, after the album's release, and following a disastrous set at a US festival, the band was heading for an inevitable split. A year after its release, Mick Jones was sacked from the band. 3 new members were added, and what followed was a few years of fighting and a very disappointing album in Cut the Crap. By 1986, the band had officially called time. However, in 1991, Should I Stay or Should I Go was used in a popular commercial for Levi's jeans in the UK. And after it was re-released, became the band's first and only #1 single in the UK, albeit nearly a full decade after its original release, and 7 years after Jones had left the band. And there's something ironic and metaphorical about that, isn't there? A former punk band song being used to sell American jeans. Even though this would be the last Clash album featuring the classic lineup, their legacy of course continues to this day. Rolling Stone ranked them number 28 in the 100 greatest artists of all time. And of course they would influence an entire generation of punk and rock bands. Without the Clash, there would likely be no Rancid, no Rage Against the Machine, no Green Day, no Franz Ferdinand, and no White Stripes. Now, another song that didn't reach #1 in the UK until years after its original release was Space Oddity by David Bowie. Now, did you know that song was originally written as a duet? I've made an entire video about this fascinating tune as well. Click over there, watch it next.